Hello, good morning, and thanks for coming to the presentation of our paper addressing the silent front lines. My name is Julio Hernández Castro. I'm currently with the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid in Madrid, Spain, and the rest of the team comes from the University of Kent in the UK, Bury area, and from Sabancı University in Istanbul, in Turkey. There is this group led by Orçun Çetin, and you will be able to meet Ejaz later as well for the Q&A session. And the only thing to mention in this first slide perhaps is that there is this QR code that we encourage you to use to download the original paper, because in this 15 minutes presentation we are afraid that we won't have a lot of time to go into any depth, so we can only attempt to entice you to read the full paper. And again, to try and be strict with time and stick to the 15 minutes, I will just say that there is a background on the war that says that it's been ongoing for quite some time, and it has been notable in the cyberspace. It has been a cyber war to a certain extent, and you have there some data to back this up. We had three main research questions when we started this piece of work. The most important probably is research question 1, how effective were the DDoS attacks during the Russo-Ukrainian conflict, whether any DDoS protection services were used, and the adoption rates, and whether the pro-Russian websites, because that's a rumor we heard, were applying any kind of geolocation-based access restriction policies. So, very brief introduction to the methodology. We collected, following some guidance by CyberKnow, some Telegram channels, and we follow this Balancer initiative and its tool, Liberator, that is now offline. And we follow there the list of targets for the day. And the data collection, we started on the 28th of November of 2022, and we finished on the 15th of April 23. Also about the methodology, very quickly, these are the main elements. Basically, we had monitoring units in Germany, 3 of them, Netherlands, Turkey, and Russia. We also had them initially in the Ukraine, but they were bombed and basically blown up. And also we mimic this Liberator unit working, but with constraints, of course, in China, Poland, Sweden, UK, and the US. So a little bit of data processing. We started with 1,388 candidates for becoming a target, but we discarded redundant, invalid, and unrelated ones, and non-unique as well, in a data cleaning process. And in the end, we finished with 1,257 unique targets, and basically half and half were targeted by pro-Russians or pro-Ukrainian, and 817 of them, so the vast majority, were domain names. There were some IP addresses as well, but mostly were domain names. So we started studying the recurrence of targets, and as you can see here in the table, there is a quite distance or separation between how pro-Ukrainian entities targeted their victims, let's say, and how pro-Russian entities did it. And we can see that most of the targets that pro-Russian entities aim towards were only recurrence, presented a recurrence of one, whereas on those targeted by pro-Ukrainians, there was, a widespread values between 1 and 9, and also 10 plus, which were, specifically, high-profile targets. Those were a minority, and for the pro-Russian activities, and they were a significant chunk for the pro-Ukrainian actors. And here you can see a nice little graph with recurrence, some examples. So green is being up, red is being down, orange that you can see at the bottom is degraded quality of service but not quite down, and X means targeted on that day. So we have some exceptions of targets that have been targeted on multiple occasions, but in the end resisted all attacks. But most of them turned from green to red, or were red at the beginning, and some of them towards the end turned from green to orange, signifying a deterioration of the quality of service, but not quite being fully down. These are similar results with a related graph. And so if we go straight to the questions we have at hand about the effectiveness of the DDoS attacks, we would see that from both sides, only a tiny minority, around 1.26, were completely unaffected, whereas the majority, like 30%, were taken down, and significantly higher if they were targeted by pro-Russian actors than if they were targeted by pro-Ukrainian actors. So the attacks by pro-Russians seem to be more successful. You have here a graph with the quality of service over different weeks. We see that the targets attacked by pro-Russian entities have to be have had a more stable trend, and in those targeted by pro-Ukrainian, there was a big gap, a big difference, let's say, after week 9. The effectiveness of the attack was highly dependent on the type of business or the type of organization that was targeted. And we see here that business organizations were some of the ones that fare better, probably because they have more resources or they are already selling online, and they are prepared against DDoS attacks. But some other organizations, like educational ones, particularly the ones targeted by pro-Russian entities, fare almost catastrophically worse. We saw as well that DDoS protection services were used, but only by a minority of around 13% of the targets. Most of them only engage on these kind of protective measures after being attacked at least once. And one of the most shocking findings of this research is that most of them were using Cloudflare, which is based in the UK and proved to be, in the US, and proved to be the most popular by far. And very surprisingly, even pro-Russian sites were prone to use Cloudflare, which is, I think, in stark contrast with the objectives, and if not the law, definitely the letter of the sanctions that are applied now to Russia. Russia has its own service, which is a good idea for any country these days, called DDoS-GAR, but for whatever the reason, it wasn't that popular. And Cloud Shield and Stonewall, based respectively in Saudi Arabia and Slovakia, were used as well, but only by a minority of targets. And regarding access policies, we saw that that only 17% employed these geolocation-based access restrictions. So the view we got from them from within Russia and from outside was remarkably different. So the vast majority, like 83%, didn't use any kind of access restriction, and these views coincide. So as a way of getting to the discussions, the pro-Russian side displayed less recurrence during target registration. So it seems that maybe they suffer less. Pro-Ukrainians also showed a trend to engage into more prolonged attacks over time. And that's perhaps because their attacks were less effective per unit of time. The most remarkable and shocking, let's say, finding is that pro-Russian websites were getting DDoS protection from the states, particularly from Cloudflare. I think at least over the time that we were studying. We don't know whether that's still true, but if it is, it's something that probably has to stop, because it's in blatant violation of the sanctions. And basically that's most of the main results. The limitations are that we were not able to include a monitoring unit based in the Ukraine, but because they were in the middle of a war and they were blown out. There was also, there are possible improvements because we use ChatGPT, but an older version, 3.5, for HTML analysis and classification. So I guess that using newer versions will be even better. We did a comparison with human experts classification. And one of the things that I'm less happy about is the lack of a baseline. So it would have been ideal to have a baseline of machines availability before and after, before and during the war, and also even during the war, whether they were explicitly targeted in the list of targets or not, and to establish a baseline and see how, being listed in these target lists really had an impact in the longevity, let's say, or the of the service. So, as a manner of conclusions, we can say that pro-Russian entities seem to have conducted way more effective attacks. There are very low, surprisingly low for us, rates of DDoS protection usage, and the geolocation-based access policies are used, but it's not a majority of people of pro-Russian sites. So in future work, we would like to monitor front within the Ukraine and gather more intelligence about how they identify and prioritize their targets. So without further ado, let's start the Q&A session, where I will be present, but also Orçun Çetin and Jazz from Turkey. Thank you very much for your time.